Just to introduce, Miles is my brother. He's the sort of the better looking one. But Miles's background really is he's the CEO of Tarsus Technologies, big group. Was the CEO of Secure Data, which is now incorporated in Tarsus. And before then was the CEO at Keefe and Swart, which is a big call center. But really Miles has been pulled into places from a turnaround strategy. And prior to that, was on the Exco at Deloitte for many years. So huge experience there, and headed up risk advisory services for EMEA, which is the whole sort of African area and Middle East. So we're really grateful. Thanks, Miles, for making time. I know you're hell of a busy, but it's over to you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the invitation. When Jonathan asked me to come and talk to you this morning, I agreed eagerly because with all of you being involved in risk management in organizations, generally speaking, it's really only corporate and enterprise size organizations that have specialist risk management departments. I know many of you will work very closely with the internal audit departments of your businesses, and you also have very close proximity to the senior leadership of your organization. You're privy to all the strategic thinking of your organization, and you're privy really at the heartbeat of the leadership of organizations. So I was very keen to come and talk to you this morning. Another reason I was keen is that to be honest, I'm personally not really interested in risk management. Even though I led a very large division at Deloitte and had this role through Europe and the Middle East and Africa, and I was always far more interested in what is it that makes some organizations effective and other organizations ineffective. What is it that makes some organizations honest and ethical, and what is it that makes some organizations really just a den of iniquity? Just an interesting little anecdote. Some of you who've been following this nonsense going on with Volkswagen recently, does anybody here know about Volkswagen's troubles with their little emissions testing and the software and so on, where they systematically and systemically lied over several years, as it turns out? Now just think about that. All of you are risk management leaders in your own field, and do you imagine, is there anybody here from Volkswagen? I mean, that would be quite interesting to know, because probably not, because whatever risk management or internal audit processes or whatever that they had within Volkswagen, which is a German company subject to some of the strictest government and compliance regulation in a very compliant country. And funnily enough, with Germany being an extremely compliant country and a very rules-based, rules-following country, they've also produced Siemens. They've just last night I went and looked up what were the 25 biggest corporate scandals and losses over the last several years, and about 8 of them come from Germany. So at one point when I was at Deloitte, Siemens had a huge cleanup around corruption as one of the biggest bribe-paying organizations on this planet. And Deloitte for 2 years had a team of 600 people in there, drawn from around the world, just trying to find all the bribes that had been paid. You remember their CFO went to jail, their CEO went to jail, and so Germany is not scared to put people in jail, but it still goes on. So what is it in organizations that allows this? And I was just reading last night about Volkswagen, and I was just getting a little bit more detail on what happened, and I was just reading detail of what market share they've lost, what fines they're going to need to pay, what compensation they're going to need to pay various people in their chain, and so on. But one of the other little jewels that came out is that they'd previously had a chief financial officer about 2 years before the big scandal on the emissions, who got axed and punished and so on because they were systematically arranging call girls for suppliers and customers of theirs. They had like a department of prostitution operating, and I didn't know that. But I read all about it last night. That was actually easily the most interesting part that I was reading, and I just wondered that what is it in the culture of an organization that these kinds of things were going on. And if you were there as risk managers and as internal audit managers and so on, would you have been able to blow the whistle on this, detect this? Would you have, would it be going on all around you, baked into the absolute fabric of the organization? So it's very interesting to me that you can run quite sophisticated. You might even have BarnOwl in there. And even with BarnOwl, you might find that all of these things are going on. Meanwhile, BarnOwl's got a compliance module, and it's got this, and it's got that. You've got lots of people in teams scurrying around, filling in forms and populating fields and generating reports and attending audit committees and risk committees and social and ethics committees and so on and so forth. But you still have, in some organizations, an absolute inability to imprint a culture of proper ethics, honesty, and integrity. Now, the other thing is, since I left Deloitte, I've had really a lot of fun organizing organizations that have got themselves into trouble, predominantly financially. So what's been needed is to go in at a leadership area. Just think about it. If you go in as CEO to an organization in an industry you know nothing about, you are at the mercy of your subordinates. An analogy that I've used in the past is something is that what you're getting in that organization is a front row seat to a submarine race. So if you think about it, have you ever seen that picture? Go and Google it on Google Pictures. Submarine race. I mean, it's hilarious. They've got all these pictures come up, and it's this lovely tranquil surface of the water. It's there, and usually blue with lovely sky and maybe an albatross or two in the sky and so on and everything. And there's a submarine race taking, and it's front row seats that are exciting. Another day at the submarine races. And if you go into an organization, particularly in an industry you're really not expert in, that's what you've got. So you've got a front row seat there. I mean, you're clapping, screaming, shouting, all the rest of it, but you can see bugger all, actually. You've no clue. But right below the surface, you've got these submarines with their commanders and their captains unleashing missiles at each other. And so every now and then, as I say, a little seat bobs up and a lifeboat and an oil slick and so on. And then you run around to the point of the oil slick. Meanwhile, this happened a kilometer below the surface, and it happened because there are currents in the sea. So it happened 10 kilometers to the north. And you found the oil slick, and you plant your flag, and you say, this is it, I'm going to fix this now. And you call in all the environmental guys here. We've got some of our environmental fellows over here in the front, so thank you for being here. And you call them in, and they come with these special nets and these special solvents, and they clean the oil slick on the surface, and you go back to the front row seat, and you do it, but all the damage took place. You've got two submarines lying on the bottom with people drowning in pitch darkness and being crushed by 5 kilometers of ocean above them, and you've cleaned the oil slick, and you tick that one off on your BarnOwl system, and you say dealt with. Okay, that one's absolutely sorted. We're not going to have that problem again. And then you watch for more oil slicks, and there are no more oil slicks, but that's because there are 120 people lying crushed to death on the bottom of the ocean. So you never ever got to the problem. You never got to see what actually went on. And leading an organization is very often like that. So one of the things that I did after I left Deloitte, I very fortunately and happily bumped into one of the people who's had the biggest influences on my professional life is Etzko Skatemer at Skatemer Associates. And Etzko's here this morning. I asked him to come because Etzko is a sociologist by training originally. I'm not sure that he's still a sociologist. Not sure what he is now, but all of us have got roots somewhere. I once passed an accounting exam, so it doesn't make me an accountant by a long shot. So in fact, I'm highly, highly dangerous as an accountant. So that's because I know where to go and look for where the bodies are buried. But so it's good training to have had, but you move on. And what Etzko started teaching me by way of framework is how do you turn that periscope upside down, and how do you peer into these murky depths of an organization? And how do you start to see what's truly going on? How do you start to see the submarines? And how do you start to see their intent towards each other as submarines? Are they flying in formation, and are they out on a thing? Apparently in South Africa, it's mainly for shark detection and protection against sharks. I read that now, one of our admirals, it was a quote, and I snoped, you know that Snopes where you can check if things are bullshit or not? He really did say that. So it's not a hoax. So he says we've got our submarine fleet just to manage the shark risk and so on. So I call that maybe I did. So anyone who didn't read that over there said, no, in the last week or so, it was, you also read it. I'm not the only one. I wasn't dreaming. But anyway, that it really happened. So no, I mean in South Africa, I'm sure it's, and I used to be so embarrassed about our politicians. Everywhere, when you travel overseas, you know, I've just been on trips to Nigeria and Kenya and so on, and I mean, when they see you coming and hear you from South Africa, they fall over laughing. Now, when you in Nigeria, and they fall over laughing, and they say, how on earth can you guys have politicians like yours? How is it possible that a country as sophisticated as South Africa, the most sophisticated business infrastructure in the continent, and you've got that's what. So I mean, we do have a very a lot of submarines all shooting each other in our public sector. That's no doubt about it. I mean, it plays out in front of us every single day, and it is possible to be on the surface, front row seats, and not know that this is going on. Unless, of course, you're stoking the fire down below, which is what I think happens. So the very important thing to think about and so on, we have been seduced into thinking and imagining over all of our education, you know, the schools you went to, the universities you went to, all the business courses, the whole construct, the way you get paid, the way our courts work and so on, this whole concept of a juristic person, which is a company. So some of you work for Transnet and Imperial and this and you start to think of these as organizations, as juristic persons. You assign them a personality, and they do have personalities, and they do have brands, and you assign them something which is actually just a construct. It's a theoretical, legal framework construct to enable us to get certain work done. So, and to enable us to execute certain tasks in an organized way that requires more than one person. So if you go back sociologically, when you had, you know, the tinker, tailor, and pie maker and so on in your village, then a village might have been that construct. Some looked after, you know, the grandparents looked after the kids, and the parents did this, and that one did that. They mainly died before they got to 35. So, because there were plagues and things in the hospitals and everything, we kind of forget that, I suppose. But the advent of the corporation, right back when that first started with things like the Dutch East India Company and all those exploration companies, and if you like, royal households like the Portuguese and the king that sent Vasco da Gama out on his ships and so on, when they started harnessing and operating in a corporate sense, we then had to find ways of holding other people accountable, and we invented companies and close corporations and all of these things. They're inventions. They don't exist. They're no more than a concept at SIPS when SIPS is working. So that and then we have directors that are appointed and law and all the rest of it. But just think about it. You can't deal with a company. You can't. Companies that try and make you deal with them as a company go bankrupt. You can only deal with a human being in a company. Now that it might be that some of those processes are automated, and you're having to deal via portals or websites, and you're dealing with that. But I mean, the day something. I bought a Garmin computer, a Garmin the other day to find my way around, and I do a lot of mountain bike exploration and so on for trails, for these routes and so on. It's my hobby, and I do this in very remote areas. So I went and bought a big Garmin because I've been lost there a few times, and then you're not quite sure where you are. And this is also all sort of big 5 territory with things that could eat you or stomp on you. So if you don't know where you are, then it's doubly troubling. So I went to buy this thing, and the way Garmin works is that you buy a device, and there's no damn map on it. If any of you know, we've had Garmins before. Then you plug the device into a website, and you register the device. Then it says, okay, the device, it truly is Miles's. Okay, that's it. And it even puts that on the screen of the Garmin now. If you lose it, it said, Miles lost me. You know, so that's then you have to download maps, and you can choose, but you have to pay for these maps, which I'd forgotten because I long last bought a thing, and the salesman in the shop didn't mention that. But I saw that, so it was 1,300 Rand for the set of maps that I wanted. So I thought, okay, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. I mean, it's a big thing. And I bought the maps. Now it comes up on the website. Hell of a nice. I see my device. Yes, there it is. This map. Yes, there it is. The map's registered to that device. That's a download. Okay, I tried. My whole IT department at Tarsus, and we got some of the smartest IT people there. They eventually set up an own no firewall network on the side with broadband, uncapped, this, that, and so on. And to have 4 hours, every time it hit 4 hours in downloading 2.6 gigs of map, it timed out, and I'd got to 42%. I never got past 42%. You're on 42%, and it blinks at you. And then I gave it to another friend in Pretoria who's, no, he's an expert on these things. He's got a device just like, he'll do it for me. And another friend who knew how to ping the website in America. And he pinged it and said, no, the problem's on the website, on that side. Anyway, 2 weeks down the line, a trip to Zimbabwe and back, big 5 on a bicycle, and so I'm still staring at a blank page. So luckily I've been there before, and I've kind of recognized 2 or 3 of the baobabs. But so I didn't get lost. But otherwise I wouldn't be here now. But I came back and we took it to Garmin themselves, NavWorld, and for a fee of 170 Rand, they downloaded the maps for me, and they said, oh yeah, no one in South Africa can download the maps. You have to have a special this and that with a satellite and so on, because the speed of the website in America is too slow, and by the time it gets through CCOM and here and everything, no one can. In fact, 42%, you did better than most. Some only get to about 36. And what happened was that the people at NavWorld in Stratham Park, has anyone here ever been there, dealt with them, bought a Garmin, done anything here? They were so nice. I mean, these people were just so nice. So I forgave them. I still like Garmin. But the point is, I couldn't deal with the damned website. So who's Garmin? Who are they? There's some clever people who do maps. They've got satellites, they take photographs, you get updates and all that. Oh, by the way, these maps update, and you get them for a year, and they do that. Anytime there's an update, Miles, bring it back. We'll load the update for you as well, because you won't be able to, even though you paid for it. So and it's 170 bucks. That's it, and we sit there and it takes 4 hours. So companies do not exist. They're a figment of our imagination. They are a legal construct. They're a juristic personality. But what has happened after 200 to 300 years, maybe even 400 if you count the first couple of corporations, is they have by now played the biggest con trick on this planet, where companies and lawyers and laws and so on have conned us all into thinking that accountability and liability and responsibility stops at the door of a non-existent mist. And that everybody behind the veil, you've heard of this piercing the veil, you guys are all risk experts, you know about, what's the name of that principle, not the Doppler effect, or what's, come on, help me here. You guys are all the experts. No, you're not, obviously. When you can look behind the liability of the company. Come on, man. Anyway, never mind. We'll think of it in a moment. So what happens is it's created the environment, it's created the possibility for massive voids in accountability. You can look at people doing abysmal things. You can look at George Bush in America launching an entire country to invade another on the basis of a lie. Everyone knows now that it was a lie. Everyone knows that they just simply wanted to control the oil supply from the Middle East and that it suited them. Everyone knows that the government in America at the time was absolutely controlled by its corporates, which it is now today. You have in America now, we think we're corrupt in South Africa. We are, by the way, unacceptably so. But in America, they have institutionalized the process of lobbying. There are lobbyists. There are lobby companies. Now just think for a second what these lobbying companies are doing for a living. And they're like legal firms. You can be a partner of a lobby company. So if you want to lobby government to get a law passed that suits you, you go to the lobbyist and they go and they lobby. And you pay donations to this, to that, and all the rest and everything. And you're in Washington and you do this stuff. So at the time of the Republican government, I mean, God, they just brazenly took Dick Cheney out from being the chief executive of what was his company, the one that provided all the arms to which was Halliburton, and put him in as the vice principal, chairman, president, whatever. And then they bought all the kit from Halliburton, his company, but don't worry, he put his shares into a trust. Remember? So just like Cyril's done with all his Shanduka shares and his ones, they put them in a trust. So it's okay, that's not me now. This is mist. It's nonsense. It's actually criminality. And then they took all the money they collect from taxes from their local Americans and they plowed it into a war. And think about this. And they bought all the kit from Halliburton, and that trust grew very, very rich, of Mr. Cheney and the guys and the Bushes with their oil wells and all their oil, and they had it. So that was institutionalized, and you know, and then we worry about our corruption, which we should. I mean, what's dreadful is going on, but it is theft, and I bet you the place is crawling with Sarbanes-Oxley professionals, with all the big firms doing risk reviews, documenting controls forever and a day, big multi-million-dollar assignments. Enron fell over, this one did that and everything. What the hell's going on here? We have created for ourselves, and in an organizational, sociological sense, a nightmare. It's a nightmare. That's what we've got. And every single one of you that works for a large enterprise and a corporate, you're living in a nightmare. Okay, so now let's just back off for a second, because you have to live, you have to eat, you have to get up William Nickel every day. So you have to do these things. I'm not sure what else could work. And I do think that you're seeing signs in organizations of a growing awareness that it is not good enough to use this image of a company or a front to go and rape and pillage and plunder from your fellow man. It isn't good enough. I mean, our universities are burning. And if you try and understand in a slightly less judgment, it's very hard not to be judgmental when you see images of people blitzing each other and burning down science labs and so on. But fundamentally, there's a system that's not working for a very large constituency in our community. Fundamentally, the system is rigged. The system is allowing systematically the enrichment of a very small group of people at the expense of the other. And it's complicated by race in South Africa, because in that very small group is largely predominated by white people, and in that poor group who are denied access to a whole lot. They are. It doesn't matter if you think they're not one, they are. Systematically, this is going on. So there's something in, for example, our education structures that's fundamentally not working. So once we've stopped shooting each other and blitzing each other and so on, one hopes that some leadership will prevail. And you know, they want Jonathan Jansen, who seems to be one of the most enlightened leaders in this country, to resign immediately, and he must go, and that's not negotiable, and this and that and so on. I mean, as a 57, about to become 58-year-old white male, my immediate knee-jerk reaction is, this is nonsense. Call in the police, sort them out, man. The rest of these youngsters want to study. But there is, at some point, some leadership has to emerge to say, what is really going on here? Where are the submarines that have landed on the bottom of the ocean, not the oil slick? Sending in the police to protect the science labs is mopping up the oil slick. There's something systemically that has to be addressed. So if any of you are going to become good risk managers, really good risk managers, with your proximity to the most senior leadership in your organization, you've got to deepen your understanding of what's really going on. And what's really going on in any organization, which is an academic, intellectual construct for convenience, so that we don't have to take each other to court personally. Your company can do that and send the public officer to go and collect the traffic fines or not pay SANRAL or whatever it is you want to do. You are given some degree of convenience and law and framework within which to operate, but do not lose sight of the societal glue between human beings. We are human beings. So my contention for all of you as risk managers, populating your BarnOwl tool, which you must do, of course you must do. There are all sorts of other risks and compliance risks and various things. You've got to manage those. But at the core of it, it is all about people risk. It's about people risk. Now, I mean, I run it's a mid-sized, it's a mid-range, medium-sized company. There are 1,200 people in it. We do about 7 billion rand in turnover a year. There are 18 offices around Africa. So it's mid-sized. It's private, which I love, because we've got a board of directors with one shareholder. If we've got a problem or we want to agree, we sit down, we work things out together. So we don't have all the noise of the investor relations that has to go on, people in markets and so on. We know what we're doing. We've got a couple of years to do it, and we can get on with making some of the changes in our business. But my challenge going into a company even that size, gaining a seat as the CEO to the submarine race, was trying to understand what's going on and try to become effective. And what happened in Tarsus, the company that I lead now, is that I encountered an organization that had been very successful for almost 30 years and was completely stuck in its way of doing things. So the culture at Tarsus, the history, the way of doing things was you recruited people fit for purpose. You had a vacancy, a job description. Someone had to do that. So you went out into the market and you recruited somebody to do that. Okay? This is how Germany works. So think about it. I worked in Germany for 6 years. And they don't recruit like we are learning to do in this country for potential. They recruit fit for purpose. So what happens is when that purpose, you don't need that purpose anymore, then that person leaves or you find them something else in the organization. But you start baking in over many, many years incredible inflexibility. You've got people who know how the processes of the company work. You know people who know their products, they know their prices, they know their suppliers, they know their customers. And what you do when you get a vacancy because someone dies eventually, then you go into the same industry, your competitor, and you go and recruit maybe someone who worked for you 5 years ago because you know them and you trust them and you bring them back, or from a supplier or from a customer, and you churn them round and round and round. So when I was with O'Keefe and Swartz in the insurance industry and the direct sales industry, it was exactly the same. Everybody there, everyone knew each other. In fact, the biggest culture shock for me was they all kissed each other. So I came out of Deloitte, and then we used to all shake hands. And then every time we went to insurance functions and so on, everybody came and hugged and kissed you, even if it was the first time you met them. So I don't know what it is about the insurance guys. They're kissers, from what I could see. And the professional services industry, like Deloitte and these guys, are handshakers. You know, so maybe insurance is just a little bit more personal. But what it is, it's a small community of managers and leaders and professionals, and they pass each other round and round and round. And this is what I found at Tarsus, was a whole group of people, and the result was when we sat down and did a strategy and said this has to change, it's digital now. We've got to be able to move things into the cloud, subscription models, pay by use, etc. You can't just run a business that sells PCs, because people now work with tablets and they've got cell phones and they've got portals and websites and so this business is going to die if we don't start getting a services component. And we said that's fine, and we ran big strategies, and I walked out into the organization, we put PowerPoints, went around the country, did presentation, yay, lots of clapping, everyone went back to their fit for purpose job, said now let's start. I could do nothing. I had no means of execution into the company. Even my immediate direct reports just looked at me. because they knew what they were going to do when they got back to their desk. And if I suggested they did anything different, then, well, he's new. He doesn't know the industry, really. They could understand the PowerPoints. They could understand the strategy. They didn't even disagree with the strategy. In fact, they agreed with it. But the company was totally immobilized. Okay, think like a company now. That's with 1,200 people in it. Think about Eskom. And Eskom, that's got to make a fundamental shift. Eskom's got huge problems. It can't collect its debts from all sorts of local authorities. It's got almost as much electricity being stolen as it's selling. It's got to try and move from coal power stations to green power stations. It's got to try and put processes in place to enable you to put a solar power thing up in your front garden and sell it back to them so they can distribute it and do it. They've got to start getting, I mean, they've made some big strides. They've done all sorts of things. City power exists today that didn't used to exist. So now that all got pulled together, and it's about how the hell do you start to steer a tanker that big when actually the timing that's left for a place like that. So it's no wonder we have blackouts. Absolutely no wonder. Then you superimpose on top of that all the sociological change that's going on, and the ideological belief of the government that owns Eskom that these are going to be development tools and so on, and you imprint that onto it, and you end up with organizations that can't do anything. So our challenge at Tarsus wasn't to implement the strategy. Our challenge was to create the capacity and the will in the organization and the ability in the organization to start to become flexible and agile. That was the challenge. And you can't go and just replace everybody with MBAs from Gibbs, because they've also been taught a whole pile of shit. So, who's from Gibbs? Who's the MBAs here? That's a formula, man. I mean, America's run by MBAs. And look what they've created. So that's why I live here, by the way. So your challenge is to create some flexibility in an organization when people are looking and saying, okay, well, we've got this new strategy, but Miles, you haven't sent out the new organogram. Oh, hell. Okay. At Tarsus, there is no organogram. You will not find an organogram. And when we did a whole rebranding exercise, and everyone got business cards, and they said, well, what do I put on my business card? What's my titles? What do you need for the market? Who are you giving cards to? You don't need them internally, do you? No, this is for customers. Put CEO. What you like. So at Tarsus, people put what they like on their business cards. But I'm being dead serious. I'm being dead serious. Then I go in my top 20 reports or so, I go and find out, this is 20 people. We're sitting with a balance sheet liability. Now, lots of you have got accounting backgrounds. A balance sheet liability of provision for leave. Okay? Some folks had 40 days leave due to them. So all you have to do if you think you're being underpaid is pitch to work every day, even if you're doing bugger all, which is called presenteeism. There's even a term for it now. We just bought a tool to go and manage presenteeism. Because when I go around and I see the number of people talking cuck to each other and doing this and that, and then I talk to their managers and saying, you appear to have too many people. And no. Miles, I actually need more people. So with more people to do what? Drink more coffee. So how do you start to create some capability for change? How do you start to create a culture of accountability in an organization where you can delegate something and it's gone from your desk? I could become Superman with my underpants on the outside, flying around doing everything. I commented to my team yesterday after 2 years. It was the first time I sat at an ExCo meeting, and there was some stunning progress and initiatives and things that went into which I had no input. It's the first time that I sat and saw presentations of stuff that we're implementing and doing around the place into which I had personally had no input. 2 years. 2 years to get to the point. My little ExCo at Tarsus is now 50% imports, 50% old guard, roughly. And the other old guard all left because they didn't like the change that was being demanded of them, or they were urged to leave. one or the other. So I sat there yesterday and I made the comment at the end of the meeting. I said, this is the first time that I've sat here and seen one thing after the next that's been put up that's actually really blown my mind in terms of the quality of what's been done. The other culture that existed at Tarsus was a bunch of people who all thought they knew what to do. So when I delegated something, they went off and did it on their own. And they didn't consult with each other, do this, and they'd come back and say, this is it, I've done the work, Miles asked me to do the work. And everyone, but this, but that, but this. We couldn't launch a new product, we couldn't launch a new service, so everybody then just shot it down. So I got Etzko to come in and help me and teach people to collaborate. Now you don't have a lecture and say, okay, you guys, now go and collaborate. And you all walk out and everyone says, yes, yes, yes. Because every person says, yes, of course we must collaborate. That's right, Miles, I really agree. Just not me. I know what I've got to do. I've been hired fit for purpose. That's my job. And everybody goes away back into their foxhole. And that's it. And do any of you work in organizations that kind of sound a little bit like this?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you change it? How do you change it? And you have got the ear of the chief executive, the CFO, the head of the audit committee, the non-executive directors that you report directly to, hopefully, in your organizations. If you don't, you're actually a bit broken. So the only way you can do it is by starting to understand how people lead people in organizations. I had a string of resignations in one of our subsidiaries over the last little while. Okay, I get the explanations about this and this that I thought was quite a key person is leaving. Oh, much better opportunity. He's going over there, but never mind, Miles, it's a customer, so he's just going to keep buying from us, this and that. Okay, first time round, that's fine, sounds good. A month later, another one, gone. Out of the same unit. Okay, get the explanation, all hell of a plausible. Okay, I'm going to personally conduct the next exit interview. All right? Oh, another, come, sit down. Oh, much better opportunity, much better, all off the same hymn sheet, hey? Got a thing, like a script. Oh, really? Well, tell me about this. What were you doing here anyway? What was your role? Did you know clearly? When did you last have it reviewed? When did you last have the bar set, the standard set? Oh, no, more than a year ago. This. What I unpacked was a total breakdown in accountability systems and so on in that particular unit. So then I gave Etzko a call and we ran a survey. An upward survey and a survey around people's interaction with each other, who helps you, who doesn't, everything. And it was just like blood on the walls. So I found a little corner inside my organization. I know everybody. I see them every day. You know, they're shooting each other with torpedoes. So I took the leader of that unit and sent him on leave. I sat at home for a few days. I need to know what's going on. And I'm sitting with the team now and just trying to understand. And I'm finding that all the stuff we're agreeing to in our organization isn't just not getting past a person. There's a blockage in the system. It's like a clot. You know, you've got this magnificent body, all of us, with the coordination of millions and trillions of cells in the body, all doing the same thing to help each other out. You know, your kidneys and your liver and your brain and your thyroid and your chemicals and your arthritis and your bones and this and that, all working together in an unseen way, coordinated by some intelligence that sits somewhere. And you get one little blood clot. One. Something goes wrong just with the thickness of your blood. You don't drink enough whiskey the night before, some problem. And it goes down and it gets lodged somewhere where it's a little bit narrow and it gets stuck. And the whole show falls over and you can become a gibbering wreck with a stroke in an instant. You're never the same again. Organizations are like that. If you can't find and keep the flows of information, communication, what's required both ways, if you can't keep that on the road, your organization, as healthy as it might look from the organization, will fall over like that. Every organization needs warfarin and whiskey. Okay, so these are, I just made a list of some of the other things. What do you think was going on at FIFA over all the years? Is there anybody in the room that didn't actually know that FIFA was corrupt. There'd been books written on it. There'd been exposés. Our own experience in South Africa was that they cornered the market. You couldn't buy a Coke without all the money going to Sepp Blatter. We'd created a systemically corrupt entity that just skimmed off the top and went around. And of course, how the hell are you going to win? How can UAE put on a World Cup soccer where you have to play indoors because it's 45 degrees Celsius outside? How many people play football? I mean, if you play football in UAE, you're going to die. How would they be able to win the World Cup? There's nobody who didn't know that money must have changed hands. On the face of it, maybe things with television rights and this and sponsorship and so on. Do you think the sponsors didn't know? How is it possible that Coca-Cola and all these companies didn't know? Is it possible? How does that become so systemically acceptable to all of us that it's cool? How? I wonder if they've, in fact, it's a Swiss company, so they've definitely got risk managers and risk management departments and this and that, because that's the law in Switzerland if anyone's ever worked there. Colleagues of yours, they probably use BarnOwl. So, in Toshiba recently, when they overstated their earnings by $2 billion, and their CEO and president, just he was both, he sold Tanaka and he had to resign over this. And when they did the investigation, they found there was a culture where management decisions could not be challenged. That's the root cause. Anybody resonate? Do any of you work in entities where the culture of management, the culture is where the management decisions can't be challenged? So that's how they came to overstate earnings, systemically, deliberately, by $2 billion. Lance Armstrong and all those things that he ran. Everybody knows that this stuff's going on. Everybody. I mean, I'm glued to the TV at Tour de France. It's my best time of the year. Can't wait. Take leave just to watch TV. You start take leave. Others put TVs up in their office and watch anyway. Presenteeism. And they don't take leave, and we end up, what we've done at Tarsus, by the way, for my senior 40 people or so, we've canned leave records. We don't have leave records anymore. None. Absolutely none. Starting now, Tuesday, 1st of March, new financial year. Take as much leave as you like. But that's what I want from you by the end of the year. And if you don't take any leave, why should I sit with a financial liability that you're going to resign at the end of the day and say, pay me 3 months pay or 2 months pay or whatever? Why must I employ armies of people to count how many days you weren't here when you probably weren't working on the days you were here? And then calculate how much of that expires and how much is this and that, and systems to do it and people to go and check this out. So we can't leave. So your guideline is 25 days. 25 days. We had systems where if you'd had 10 years service, then you get this, then you get that. Whole systems to calculate leave. And yet we still sat with millions of rand leave liability on our balance sheet. I said, you want to make your budget this year? Let's just finish the year with no leave liability. Just take all your leave, all of you, 20 people. If you go and take all your leave, we can write 5 million rand back to the balance sheet, back to the income statement. We'll reverse a leave pay provision. That's the first part of your budget. Nailed. Just take leave. All you have to do is leave, and we'll make budget. Think, how stupid is that? Isn't that stupid? Have any of you thought about how stupid that is before? Wow. I mean, but I mean, you accept it. You've probably got processes and controls in there. You probably highlight it as a risk. You flag it and send it off to the audit committee. And, oh, not. Just can the leave. If the guy's not doing his job, ask him to leave. Permanently. Here's what I want from you for the year. Sit down. Go and get it done. And if you have to work weekends and this, I don't want to know about overtime, and I don't want to know about leave and leave pay provisions. You go down, your guideline's 25. And by the way, I'm going to come and survey you once a year on your stress levels. With this magnificent lady called Tani Ina from the Potch University, who comes in and runs questionnaires, and if you're all stressed, one of the things says, take leave. When did you last take some leave? So the system we have is you send me a meeting request and all your colleagues a meeting request with free for the day on the top, and you say, I'm going to be out of the office, I'm going on holiday to Pofada. And I know, I look up and oh, so-and-so's away. That's it. It's the only leave records we've got starting Tuesday. You think you could get that to fly in some of your organizations? No, because we're the people that the equivalent of a 13th check is to cash in some leave every now and then. That's the system that's operating. Okay, Lonman and Marikana. Etzko's very close friends with Mark Munro, who was the man left holding the can. So Ian Farmer was very sick, if you remember, CEO of Marikana, was in hospital with cancer, and the COO, Mark Munro, was running the show. Mark told Etzko and I, in a huge workshop that we hosted, for a whole lot of people involved in this, that what fundamentally went wrong with Marikana, if you want to dig down to go and look for the submarine lying on the bottom of the ocean, was that the company lost its ability to talk to its staff. It lost its ability to communicate. A blood clot had got stuck in the communications artery, and they had delegated or abdicated their communications infrastructure, ability, and so on to the shop stewards in the unions. So the union, who was dominant on the mine, very cozy with the management, NUM, Cyril Ramaphosa on the board, came out of MUM originally, Kasatu and everything. Just think about his background, where it was. He's all sitting on the board, they'd sit there. If they wanted to communicate stuff to the staff or find out from the staff, they worked through the unions and the unions talked to them. Up pops AMCU after one particularly really vicious strike. This affected people, competition between the unions. The unions start communicating for competitive purposes the message that, you know, the owners of the business, the managers, the management and so on, they're the bad guys. We're the good guys, and they get things, and then when the management try to tell their story to their staff, try to find out what's going on, try to have conversations, they couldn't. Eventually, do you remember? They found a way of talking directly, bypassing the unions with SMS things. They went and bought millions rand of contact with old O'Keefe and Swart. Business, I was there, they did it for them. They put messages where they could start to get surveys done via SMS with the phone. AMCU took them to court to try and stop them from doing that. AMCU took them to court to try and stop the management at Lonman from talking to their staff, because they knew that what they had was the communications infrastructure to their staff. And then they started finding out directly that actually a lot of people want to come back from work. Not surprising, they broke, just want to get back to work. It was intimidation, went on and ended up with one of the biggest tragedies in this entire country. So you can trace, so Mark Munro told us that you can trace the origins of all of that problem back to an inability which started really with a lack of will to communicate directly with your staff. And anybody who's ever led an organization will know you cannot communicate with your staff down through the channel. Let me go and have an extra meeting now. I call my 5 or 6 lieutenants. They're all going to agree with me anyway, because they're frightened to disagree with management decisions. And then you all resoundingly and violently agree on stuff, and you go out and maybe one calls a meeting with his next layer and explains what you've just done and this and that and everything. But essentially they operate as secret agents. And by the time you go and just spend a day or two with some of the junior people in your organization, you start to understand that A, they make assumptions and create fantasies and myths about the company and the management, and B, they've got no cooking clue what's going on. None. So every organization has to have layers of communication. You have to have, if I'm the leader and I want to communicate to the staff, I have to talk to the staff. I have to go and eat in the canteen with my blue collar workers. I have to go and sit in amongst them. The other day I put 2 days aside and just had one-on-ones in our biggest warehouse. Just come, one at a time. They stood and queued, half an hour each. We just talked. Who are your kids? Where did you come? How long have you been with the company? What's your name? And so on. I learned more about my own business from them than I did from the managers I see every day. We'd had all sorts of theft problems in the warehouse. For the next 2 months, 3 months, 4 months after that, we had surpluses. We had not one thing missing. After me just spending 2 days asking people what their names were. So this Lonman is just a good example also where of a company not being able to. So I've just made some notes here to say to you as the lead risk managers, that if you start seeing your organizations through a slightly different lens, what you'll see every time, where the biggest risk, the most ignored risk in your organization, are these communications and leadership style. ETSCO will teach you with these tools that his business has, that if your staff feel taken from by their leadership and not given to, and given to isn't just all about bloody ping pong tables and so on like BarnOwl have got next door for their staff. Very nice, you need to do that. But it's also, do you really hold people accountable? If you delegate to them, do you let them get on with it? Do you trust them? If you don't, I'll tell you now, I personally, if I'm not trusted by the person to whom I'm reporting, I'm dysfunctional. I can't spend half my life trying to explain and justify. It's the first time in my life now, in my career, that I'm sitting as a member of a board in an organization where I feel that every one of the 4 non-executive board members trusts me. It's the first time. Never mind the big blue chip Deloitte down the corner sitting on their exco and so on. We used to eye each other out, check each other out. The place is fundamentally built on the basis of competition between each other. If you have people in your organization competing with each other, and how many organizations are deliberately constructed for people to compete internally? The moment you've got that, you've got someone withholding information here, you've got somebody doing this, you've got that, you've got duplication popping up, and so on. If you're not recruiting people to give them a career, you're recruiting them to give them a job, like they do in Germany, you have fundamentally got a problem. If the whole hard wiring is we recruit for potential, let's continually see how you're doing, give you feedback, can we give you more responsibility? If we do that, we'll pay you some more. Let's try you here, won't you take this on? And if it's all done on a basis, so this little dysfunctional unit that we've got right now within Tarsus, not that Tarsus I could claim to be totally functional, you never get there, by the way, this is a rainbow, you chase forever. So this one, I just pulled some of the senior people and delegated all the various tasks. We sat there around a meeting and they ran, we must see the energy. They ran off. Why? I asked them, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you do this? So suddenly they're doing something. I'm not paying them any of them anymore. No one's going to get paid overtime for taking on these extra roles in the short term while their leader's on leave, because he had burnt out. I mean, that's the other thing that happens. When you have total and utter exhaustion and burnout, that's the other thing that happens. People burn out. It's the speed of being Superman through the thing, you know. Actually burns you if you don't have the right kit on and then you get damaged. Okay. So I contend that the biggest risk in any of your organizations is the culture of the organization through leadership and people, and inability to hold people accountable, and unwillingness to hold people accountable, mistrust between people, and none of these things happen without interventions in your organizations. None of that will just happen because everyone's cool and they come to work and it's nice. In organizations, these theoretical legal constructs, you have to deliberately go in and create an environment where trust is possible and so on. You can't, no one will trust people if there aren't consequences for your actions. If there are no consequences, you can have a meeting. I mean, ETSCO will teach you, he says, if you sit in a meeting and there's some big balls up in a thing, and you say, okay, this, and then you don't want a witch hunt, because witch hunts are very uncomfortable. And you say, okay, let's learn from this. Has everyone learned from it? Yes, we've all learned from it. You won't promise, you won't do that again. I won't do it again. And you all go back. You're sick. There have to be consequences. If you're in an organization where there are no consequences, where there are no witch hunts, where no one is held accountable, and you all just learn the lesson and go back, everyone soon figures out that there are no consequences. And it's mayhem. It's mayhem. If somebody so much as puts a false travel claim in, you have to dismiss them. You have to. They've stolen from the company, especially if it's someone in a leadership position. You have to. You have to run a disciplinary hearing. Use the processes. But if you say, hey, I see there was a failure, just don't do that again. Okay, sorry, Miles, off you go. Do you think you're the only one who knows? Those two. Others are watching. You have to. So consequences, accountability, and they don't come from nowhere. They come from a proper system of accountability in an organization and the will to hold people accountable. And in the beginning, before you get used to doing that, that is damned unpleasant. It's the hard decisions. That's what we're trying to do now in the organizations that I lead. That's my almost obsessive focus. Is around setting the bar, getting a clear understanding of what needs to be done, holding people accountable, and there being consequences. If you can get that right, and Etzko will also tell you, like he keeps teaching me, and you have to do it again and again and again and again and again and again. Every induction program has to be infused with this. Everything has to come through because people change in organizations, they get stale, they slip back to what they are. The temptation to be selfish, not to share information, it's all there, all the time. Competition creeps in. If I do this, then I'll get the promotion, this one won't, and then maybe I can do that, do this. It goes on all the time. The submarine race is fierce. Fierce. And there are currents down there, and you can't see very well, and you can bump into whales and shit. All sorts of stuff.